To me, one of the things you do is you have to take care of yourself. I'm asking those with the diagnosis to resource themselves. Family members have to resource themselves also. So are they getting away? Are they taking time to themselves? Are they not picking things up, that they're not responsible for because they're worried they're not going to happen? All these things are components of it, but if you don't take care of yourself, then suddenly what starts to happen is the distress of the condition starts to affect you, and you're having these secondary effects from the ADHD diagnosis rolling over. Now, the reality is the vast majority of people, okay, everyone with ADHD, they have good hearts. Okay, unless there's character issues going on, there's been severe trauma, or someone's got other issues happening. This is not a meanfully, willfully, I'm just trying to piss you off, so I'm going to forget it again. And that's hard because it doesn't look that way when it's happening. And so having some compassion and frustration tolerance around those interruptive spaces can be helpful for family members. It does not take away the responsibility of the individual to take care of whatever the issue is.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott.
There are a lot of things in life that you can and should compromise on, but mental health care is not one of them. Rather than thinking it's impossible to find a psychiatrist near you, or an available therapist that takes your insurance, or a primary care physician with openings, check out ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and a website where you can search and compare hundreds of types of highly rated in-network doctors, including mental health providers, and instantly book appointments with them online. You can search by location, availability, and insurance. So literally no compromises here because you've got more options than you would have ever imagined. You can find mental health providers who offer in-person appointments, virtual visits, or both, whatever works for you. The insurance they take and their fees are transparent. They're listed right there. Most importantly, you can get real patient reviews to get a feel for the person before you commit to setting that first appointment. And here's the thing. The typical wait time you see a mental health provider booked on ZocDoc is just 4 days. That's it. Sometimes you can even score same-day appointments. And remember, it's not just therapists. You can find dentists and every other kind of physician that you can think of. So whatever that your ache and pain is that's bothering you and you know you need to handle, ZocDoc is your go-to. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/TU. ZocDoc.com/TU. It's free. It's easy. Go for it. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. I'm very pleased to bring you a very, I don't want to say old colleague because that dates both of us, but somebody that we've both been in community for a very, very long time, James Ochoa, who is going to bring us up to date and even forward in what's the state of the state with adult ADHD. And, really we're going to take a new slant on it and look ahead and then put all of this under a neuroscience attachment lens. So welcome, James. We're so happy that you're here.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that, for certain.
So can you, just to provide a little context, describe yourself for our audience?
So I am a licensed professional counselor in Austin, Texas. And the interesting thing about my career is that 99% of what I have treated has been ADHD for 35 years. It's a strange statement for me to make. It is no longer an ego statement anymore. I've just been inundated, and it wasn't my plan for my career. But I really stumbled upon the conundrums within ADHD early on in 1989 with a child I worked with who was 6 years old, who turned out to have a photographic memory. As I was playing a card sort game with him, it became very clear when he said, I take pictures of the cards, because he was winning this card sort game with me, and I'm 27 years old. And then I stumbled on my own diagnosis in 1996 as a part of doing a computerized test that I was using for evaluation. And it just became this discovery, but I kept seeing these dilemmas that wouldn't go away. and kept solving them and kept working with them. And so here I am 35 years later working with it still passionately.
You are definitely the expert. You also have a book, Focused Forward, Navigating the Storms of Adult ADHD. That'll be linked in the show notes for sure. You mentioned that you stumbled onto your diagnosis. That is such a common experience. So, as our adult listeners are out there, can you say a little bit more about this notion of stumbling onto an adult diagnosis?
Well, what happens for many adults who stumble or suddenly discover it in adulthood is that something has occurred in their life. A career has shifted. They've had a divorce. They had children. Their responsibilities have suddenly layered to where their executive functioning no longer is able to keep up. And so suddenly they find themselves behind the curve and it doesn't make sense to them. And so they seek help with therapy or understanding supplements or exercise, but nothing really takes away this sense that something's off base. I'm not quite reaching the potential I should be able to reach. So many of my adults who come to me for diagnosis are a little bit like, I have looked everywhere else in my life, and this nothing makes more sense to me than this. Now, an adult diagnosis needs to go back into childhood, right? This is a neurological, developmental, genetic issue. So it's not something that occurs spontaneously in adulthood. So all of my diagnostics are very interactive and educational. And so I'm going back through someone's life history, as I say, looking for pattern matching, the things that haven't gone away, that don't have explanation in other psychological or other circumstantial realms. So, but that big piece of it, stumbling upon this, many adults, they're shocked to learn this, but it begins to put together things in their life in a way they hadn't made sense of before. And you referenced the ideas of attachment theory earlier. It's like their attachment to themselves has always been not severed, but clouded, or, something was always seemed to be off with it. And when they receive a diagnosis or they go through an evaluation and it's an accurate diagnosis, then suddenly there's these lights that turn on. There are uncertainties that suddenly start to get filled in at a level that begin to connect you to yourself in a different way and a different way to understand it. Now, I will say in the adult ADHD diagnostic world, one of the biggest challenges around that is that many adults have attention issues from different circumstances or reasons that don't have anything to do with ADHD.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What about this notion that ADHD is a fad or a trend or overdiagnosed?
Well, it has come and gone in trends that have been around mood disorders or memory problems or other things in our psychological world, as you and I would know. But the fact that everyone has attention problems from time to time, career, sleep, children, being overworked, COVID, oh my gosh, huge post COVID issues can cause problems with executive function. And we had a big uptick in diagnosis around COVID. And some of that could have been the stress involved. Some of it more people were reaching for help. There were more services available for diagnostic measures. A lot of things that really raised that. But, we think about 3 to 5% of the world's population, that's the terms or the gauge I use conservatively, have this neurological mindset, condition, genetics. We still only think of maybe 20% of those who actually have it know it. They're diagnosed with it. They do something about it. So what are the others? The others they think it's a character issue. They go through life very disheveled. They create systems that support themselves really well. They don't really understand why, but they do it. So it is a complicated space, particularly in the adult realm for ADHD.
Yeah, I'm thinking of my caseload who has accommodated me. I'm very well known through my clients for, I'm basically considered calendar impaired. So if you have a recurring appointment on my thing, we will have no problem. I am 100% there. But if you call or text me and we begin to move it, that involves a few steps. And those steps can get interrupted so easily. And now they've trained me or I've trained them, I'm not sure which, that when there's a change, they'll actually like follow up and like, okay, confirming, you know what I mean? I had always thought of it as I called it a calendar impairment because that's where it would show up often.
There's a reason, I'm a single practicing therapist in Austin, Texas, and I've really led the front as I see it around the emotional and mental stress that spins off the diagnosis, because that's been the conundrum that I failed at fabulously in the first 10 or 15 years. It was just not something that was easy to get around. And so when you look at it from that lens of the emotional and mental stress that's surrounding it, and you look at the supports that you need as a result of that, that's really where I continue to do a lot of my research clinically in connection with my clients and what their needs are and what they're presenting with. Because if you have a chronic condition, in some cases, meaning, okay, this is neurological developmental, meaning it's not going to go away. It affects different areas of the brain that we know are in executive functioning. So our executive functioning based on planning, prioritize, evaluate, focus, concentrate, motivate. That's what I summarize it into, those 6 factors. That's the orchestra leader of the brain. So if you look at the executive functioning, you've got planning, prioritizing, evaluating, and then focusing, concentrating, motivating is how I summarize what that executive function of the brain is. We know that it takes till about 30 for that neurological and developmental process to complete now. So the identity crises we all went through in our 20s was very natural. It doesn't settle. Once it settles for people with the diagnosis of ADHD, it's still underactive. Doesn't mean it doesn't work at all. It's underactive based on blood flow and oxygen to the brain in that area. And so I say the mind in that arena then works in fits and starts. Sometimes it works really well. Other times it's just fitful and it's all over the place. But it can be polarized by things that are highly interesting or passionate, can really grab that part of the brain, bring your personality and your emotions and your character into it. And suddenly you're hyper focused. And so, in many ways, we think about the attention related issues, Sue, and the neurology of the mind as being they're just not well governed. Okay. They're not well adjusted. And so you could work in fits and starts. We also know it affects the memory aspects of the mind based on active working memory being interrupted. So you literally use the chemistry of dopamine there that you lose in midstream. So I'm going from one room to the next and I forget what I was doing because it just dropped out. Okay, so you have to use workarounds. Medications can help. I still only see medication about as 10 to 15% of the intervention because you have so much to learn strategically, educationally, developmentally to manage the diagnosis.
When I was seeing something that medication, and this is like super superficially reading a headline, so you're the expert, you can tell us, that medication in children, there's some very positive studies related to it helping cognitive development. Yeah, that which was surprising.
Well, what happens there is that one way we talk about it in the field is that it's eyeglasses for the mind. Okay, so if you've needed glasses, I wear contacts. Without my contacts, I'm legally blind. Okay, if you can't focus hard enough, if you're blurry vision to get something clear, medications helps to clarify that thinking process, helps to activate that executive functioning to a degree. Does not take it all away. This is not panaceas we're talking about. And these are significant medications that have to be managed and understood well because, as the press would put out there, you're easily abusable. But from a child's point of view, early on, it's helping their brain to stay in a space where they can learn, where they can develop strategies and understand who they are and how things are developing in their life. So it gives them that ability to evaluate and think out of things a little bit more.
And what about subtypes of ADHD?
I stay in the arena that there are 3 main subtypes we diagnose. We have hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and combined types. Out of that 3 to 5%, as I talked about, as I understand it, it's about 85% is a combined type. It's both hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive. 10% of that diagnostic pool is inattentive, which is just problems with focusing, concentrating, and motivating. So someone looks like they're paying attention. They don't have the behavioral disruption of the hyperactive impulsive aspect of this, but internally they're completely distracted or getting pulled off. For them, for the inattentive type, it makes an enormously difficult emotional and mental space because they're feeling something inside that other people outside may not see. And so someone says, well, you look like you're paying attention. And they're like, well, I don't feel like it inside. And so you get these really juxtaposed positions on the inattentive spectrum that really creates an uptick in the emotional and mental stress, as I talked about earlier already, just based on what the condition is. And then the final type you have is a hyperactive impulsive, where they don't have any challenge with focusing and concentrating. In fact, hyper focusing or really dialing in to a point of a detriment for too long can be a challenge for them. As I write about in Focus Forward, actually, my oldest son, who is to me a rock star in New York City, in Brooklyn, working in the computer science area, has a hyperactive impulsive type. And I talk about that in the book, that he's a mental level IQ, went to Georgia Tech, great, great person, incredible skill sets, but very driven in his life. He has to really keep tabs on how many projects he has going, because he can run himself over and others if he's not careful in that hyperdrive. And so because it's 5% of the diagnostic pool, it's a very rare condition. I do see it in my practice from time to time, but many of those individuals just look like they have 3 or 4 times the amount of energy of anyone else. And they really can run themselves over, like I said, if they don't know how to manage it. So you have hyperactive impulsive, you have inattentive, and you have a combined type. And the genetics you're born with are pretty much what you stay with unless there's been serious emotional challenges, really high detriment. There's been a medical issue involved, there's been a head injury. I write about in Focus Forward, or that I also had a closed head injury at 4. So I had some executive functioning issues. I still do. I'm very sensitive to frustration and stress in my life. That's on top of my ADHD combined type, which is in a pretty severe case. As I say, I don't take care of it, it takes care of me. So I constantly resource myself. You were talking about kind of what's the future, what's the forward piece. I wrote Focus Forward 8 years ago. All the work and research I've done really since then has been about resourcing. How do we counterbalance the mental and emotional stress of chaos, disorganization, impulsivity, not finishing things, wondering if we're ever going to reach our potential? That's ad nauseum. I call it the emotional distress syndrome of ADHD. And I highlight that well in my first book, Focus Forward. Well, my second book, When the Shiny Wears Off, Navigating the Lifetime Storms of Adult ADD, really is going to be looking at resourcing and how do you take care of yourself in a way that's a long-term measure.
Yeah, this is going to be especially important for partners, parents, bosses,
Absolutely.
people that are in close relationships with people who struggle.
Yeah, it really is. Really is.
So tell us a little bit then about resourcing. What have you learned,
I'm learning that it's a constant add-on position, meaning I'm adding to resources in my life that I can use. One of the real conundrums within the ADHD spectrum and dealing with the diagnosis is something called being consistently inconsistent. Something works for a while and then it's not interesting to me. It falls off my schedule. I don't remember it, but I'm constantly kind of resetting or having to redo. Well, one thing on the adult ADD spectrum is to normalize that. Okay, we all go through bits of inconsistencies in our life. Those with ADHD, it becomes really chronic or challenging. So, because of that, the resourcing model is you want to continue to develop things to resource yourself. So, what does resourcing mean? Things that feel nurturing, things that feel calming, things that feel containing to me, things that kind of help me center and stay focused.
Like what? What are some examples?
Like some of the simple ones I've really been working on is like I stopped using refined sugars and caffeine. Okay. Caffeine almost 3 years ago, refined sugars 2 years. That was like a never process. I'm in drug and alcohol recovery for 35 years, and I could never see that happening. And so people ask me, well, what do you use for your resourcing or your stimulation now? And I use cold water and I use breathing. So breathing is an element that can calm you, but it can also energize you. So I teach something so that we can put in the show notes, something called a 5-breath pressure technique, which is just a 5 deep breaths where on the last breath, you're letting your air out half the way. You're waiting until you need to take a breath where the CO2 builds up and I need to take a full breath. You're letting that breath out. You're taking a full breath in and you're holding it, but you're tightening your stomach and you're pressurizing it. So you feel the blood flow and oxygen push up in your body, and then you release the breath.
Would you mind a demonstration?
Oh, I'd love to do that. That's always so fun. So it's very simple. And then I've got directions, which we can put in the show notes on kind of how to do this. So this is just 5 deep breaths that I'm going to walk us through. And they're going to be in through the nose, out through the nose. Unless you have nasal related issues, you can use your mouth. But I like people to go in through the nose and out through the nose. When I say a deep breath, I mean a deep breath that moves your diaphragm, your stomach. So your stomach's going to push out. So that's a deep breath I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and take our first deep breath in and release. Second breath and release. Third breath in and release. Fourth breath in and release. Now take a fifth breath in. Now release it halfway out and hold. So for this demonstration, you'll hold your breath, and you may feel a little bit of dizziness or disorientation for some people. You let that pass, but it gives you a little bit of a mini micro meditation to kind of calm and stay centered. When you feel the need to take a breath, you're going to let the breath out and full breath in. So there's your breath out. Now take a full breath in, Sue, and hold it. Now tighten your stomach just ever so slightly, a little bit, where you'll start feeling it push up. Yes, your blood flow will come up here and your face will turn a little bit red. And when the pressure gets to the top of your head, you release it. Okay. So that's a 5 pressure reset breath technique.
And you would use that when?
Throughout the day, as you're transitioning from one thing to another, if you're beginning to feel a little overwhelmed, it's just a way to insulate the body from stress coming around disruptions on the ADHD spectrum. But it's just a good way to recenter yourself.
So neurologically, what is it doing?
So neurologically, we're changing the mind's mindset literally on how well it is able to stay centered and focused. And so we're breathing in, so we're increasing our blood flow and oxygen. We're deliberately in the kind of the pushing of the breath at the end. We're pushing blood flow and oxygen through the system. And that is also expelling carbon dioxide, which is a waste matter on stress and those types of things out of the body.
So we're deactivating, right?
Yes,
yeah.
We're really calming ourselves, and the center of our brain, the survival, that kind of mechanism of limbic system to really kind of overactivate gives us a breath. And I say, breath to me is one of the most important tools to be able to use for resourcing. And it's the first thing we do and the last thing we're going to do in our lifetimes. Okay. And it's the only autonomic system in the body that we can deliberately take control over like that for a short period of time. But it's a very simple technique. So when we talk about resourcing, something as simple as that. Other things around resourcing could be what I would call as micro meditations, which is listening to a short meditation, 3 to 5 minutes throughout the day to kind of reset yourself. I have another micro meditation, which I call the 1 minute staring at the sun. So it's a sun salutation kind of meditation where if you're looking at the sun, sunglasses on, or making sure you close your eyes. It's not about harming your eyes. But you're looking at the sun with your closed eyes and you're counting 1001, 1002, up to 1060, which is about a minute. 25 years, that has never, never ceased to amaze me on how it resets me. And it's always when I get up to about 1030, my mind's just spinning, going, when is this going to be over? And then I feel like I'm calming down the other side. But again, it's taking that conscious control over of what's going on in our environment, which we know is so important for stress, not just from ADHD, COVID. As I say, technology, information, and stress are at all-time highs, and all those are affecting everyone's attention span. So it's helpful.
I really love these. One of my favorite was the fake yawn.
Oh, yes.
It's both a breath technique, but also is as powerful as a mini meditation because it forces that oxygen in there. And like you said, just by changing the percentage of oxygen in your body, it signals to your nervous system safety and danger. So as you're increasing the oxygen percentage, basically the way I explain it is you can trick your nervous system so that it's noticing, oh, plenty of oxygen, things must be okay. And then it begins to kick in GABA and all of the deactivating neurotransmitters. And then your body begins to catch up, like you're saying, so that in that 60 seconds, you actually, like at first you're forcing it, and then your body actually begins to go in that direction. It's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also something which I heard Dr. Huberman out of the Huberman podcast out of Stanford talk about, that one of the most relaxing breath techniques is that straw technique, where you take a full breath in, you take a sip more, but then you let it out like a straw very, very slowly. And that acts as kind of, to me, it's a progressive muscle relaxation on the lung. It really helps to recenter you and reset kind of where you're headed. But resourcing, I have anything from personalized blankets that I use for my meditations. I have essential oils that I use for calming and centering. And again, none of these are panaceas. None of these are going to be these magic bullets that suddenly everything is different. They're adding into comforting yourself and nurturing yourself as you go throughout life to really resource yourself around counterbalancing the stress of ADHD.
Hey, attachment has become somewhat of a fad. It's very, very popular. There are millions and millions of downloads on social media. There's lots of people calling themselves expert or attachment informed or all kinds of things like this. And we love it that it is so popular, that people are interested in their history and how their history impacts today. But you really want to get the most solid science possible. And Ann and I have worked for many years to translate all that we know in our 30 years of practice and on this podcast and life experience and as parents, and put it into this book called Secure Relating, Healing Your Own in an Insecure World. If you're a therapist, can almost guarantee you don't know everything in this book. I think you'll be challenged. And if you are a lifelong learner, somebody who just wants to, not from a professional standpoint, more from a personal standpoint, if you want to learn about the different attachment patterns, if you want to understand your partner better or your child better, if you're a parent that is interested in creating the best options and opportunities for your child related to attachment, teachers have loved it. It's been very helpful for them in the classroom. Professionals of all ilks, attorneys have used it, certainly the medical profession. So it's a little bit of a sleeper. People often don't know about it, but it is really solid. It's critically acclaimed, and we've just got to tell you about it. So just go to securerelatingbook.com or Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you get your books. We love sending people to their local bookstore, of course, and check it out. And if you're somebody that this is all old news to and you've read it already, if you support the book, if you appreciate it, please go on to Amazon or Goodreads and let everybody else know about it so other people can learn this life-changing science. All right, thanks. Sponsors approach us all the time on many different products, and we take your trust very seriously. So we definitely do our homework. When Ned's Mellow Magnesium popped up, I was intrigued. I had heard a rumor that low magnesium, was the cause of muscle cramps. And I will tell you that the thing that keeps me awake most at night is these wicked calf cramps that I get randomly. Man, I don't know if you've had one before, but they are not fun, especially when you're trying to sleep. So I began to look into it, and I began taking a scoop a day and tracking my cramps. And I will tell you that I can't say that it's exactly because of that, but since I've started taking it, I have not had a muscle cramp in my calf at night, and I am sleeping great. 75% of Americans are deficient in magnesium, and it is associated with over 300 enzyme reactions, especially related to muscle and nerve functioning. It can underlie trouble such as type 2 diabetes, migraines, depression, anxiety, insomnia, general fatigue, even osteoporosis. Ned's Mellow Magnesium is a powerful daily super blend that contains the most bioavailable and nutrient-dense forms of magnesium on Earth. It also includes other trace minerals and the two most stress-busting aminos, GABA and L-theanine. And here's the thing, it actually tastes really good. My favorite flavor is pomegranate, but it actually comes in 4 delicious flavors: lemon, lavender berry, pomegranate, and naked, which is stripped down flavor-free version. That is the one that you want to add to your smoothies and to your protein shakes and things like that. I like that they have full transparency. You can find on their website, right there for viewing, all their third-party lab reports. Their products have over 5,000 five-star reviews. So become the best version of yourself and get 15% off all Ned products with code TU. Go to helloned.com/TU or enter code TU, that's for Therapists Uncensored, at checkout. That's HELLO, hello, Ned, NED.com/TU. helloned.com/TU to get 15% off. So let me give you a scenario. So you're late and it's an important thing that you're going to, and you kind of cram too many things in before you go because you haven't planned accordingly. And then you're like, okay, I'm on way, right? You get in the car, you realize you don't know the address. Then you finally figure out the address and you put it in, and it's way further than you thought. So now you're really super late. Like, tell me, like, where in that, and now you're panicked and you're driving like a maniac trying to get there. And you're also texting saying, right? Okay. Tell me,
Boy,
interrupt that.
Yes, interrupt it. So the first thing to interrupt in that space is certainly be safe in your driving, because it has it really is. We don't understand. We're driving around like oldest son says, 3,000 or 4,000 pound, metal machines, and we're distracted.
And people with ADD have a higher mortality rate,
yes,
actually.
They do. Yeah. The research on the long term, we can talk about that a little bit. It's just not pretty to look at, but it's very realistic. So, and you're in this scenario, you're overactivated, clearly. You begin to observe the process. Okay, I'm overactivated. And literally, I will tell people, Sue, talk out loud to yourself. Because when you talk out loud to yourself from an attention point of view, you're hearing what you say, and you're using the aura motor of the mouth, which is a somatic movement of the body. Okay, so your brain has two other outlets to kind of grab onto to ground yourself. So it's just telling yourself, okay, I'm in a rush and I'm late, and I know I'm late, and this is not fun, and it's much further than I thought. See, I would tell people, pull over to the side of the road and take a minute to do some deep breathing and slowing down, because driving 80 miles an hour to go 20 miles is going to save you, I don't know, you go do the math on it, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It's nothing. You can't get there sooner.
It's just a sign of your own activation.
Sure. I will also tell people to micro, then meta analyze something. Micro is where I am right now. I'm in my car. I'm rushed. I pulled over the side of the road. I'm going to calm myself first. What does this mean in the bigger picture? This is not something I want to happen all the time, but it's not the end of the world. It's not going to.
It's not a job interview.
Right. But what I did was micro and macro. So I'm trying to create some neuro flexibility in my mind back and forth. Okay. And then I would put on some kind of calming or centering. I would put on smooth jazz or something like that. I might start to sing to myself. I might play games like I'm going to be a driving angel and let people come in, because I'm not going to get there any faster in this manic state. What I am going to try to do is center myself before I get there. So when I do get there, I'm not a maniac any more than I was. And the last thing I remember, I've just given you, a number of resources there, is I have a term I say, I hurry slowly. So it's a counterbalancing. I'm going to hurry because I want to get there, but I'm going to do it slowly. And so it's like this, okay, I'm going to tether myself and work through this. But that is a common event, certainly for many people, and those diagnosed with ADHD, it happens way too often, too often.
We were using the car example, but another thing I've noticed to myself is, like, even when I used to work at an office, that I would find myself not running, but like walking very quickly, like from doom to doom to doom to doom to doom, And when I would catch myself, I would just sort of laugh about, like, what? Like, it's not going to be any better when I get to the copy machine 2 seconds faster, right? And so, again, that mindfulness of physically slowing down your
Yeah.
body so that now you're mindfully walking.
Yes.
That's kind of the, what did you say?
Yes.
Hurry,
Hey,
hurry,
hurry slowly.
hurry slowly, right? That actually slowing is, slow is fast. And there was no rush. Like it was really literally like a manifestation of just the metronome, internal metronome. It was not an actual, there was no need to be in that kind of a rush.
I do want to point toward those diagnosed with ADHD will feel what is known as an internal restlessness, which I believe clinically, or as I understand it, kind of an underactivity in that executive function of the mind that kind of creates that neurological hum, a little bit of a tinnitus of the mind, so to speak, on a always thinking, wondering about what if happens here, because the mind is, if it's underactive in that area, it sets up potential threat mechanism that something's wrong here. So that internal restlessness is many times not necessarily something that is going to go away, but it is something that can be managed. It can certainly develop into higher states of anxiety and panic attacks and other types of things that are not ADHD. And we know depression and anxiety occurs at a very high rate, 30-40% in the diagnosis with ADHD, because of the disruptive nature of the diagnosis if it's not treated.
If it's not treated and understood, because otherwise it's easy to just assume, oh, I'm lazy or I'm disorganized, I'm scattered. And also to be misunderstood by people, like you said about the hyper focus. It's like, I'm imagining a parent saying to another parent, well, yes, he can focus. We can't get him off his game, or whatever it is. So don't say he can't focus on his homework because he focuses on things he likes, which is then like attributing this to the character of the child.
Right. And that they should have some willfulness to control it. Where the reality is something about that game, something about that interest or passion has grabbed their attention. So, it's one of the things I talk about, besides educating yourself about this consistently, is what I call personalizing strategies. There are, in fact, I think in our field, myself professionally, that there is so much help available, so many ways to come about this. This is an executive functioning challenge. So those who are going to reach for help, it's hard to know what help is good help or what help is. So to me, there's a little bit of a challenge, and there's 1,000 organizational strategies out there that are really good. How do you personalize those in a way that are meaningful to you? So I've worked with children, I've worked with parents, I've worked with, my oldest client has been 87 years old. I mean, this does not go away. So educating, personalizing strategies, mindfulness is a big piece of this, and resourcing is the other main aspect of this that we're obviously talking a lot about here today.
And I really love the compassion that you're bringing and kind of seeing the person as a whole person. I want to also go back just for a minute and let's bring in the people close to them. Can you speak to them for a few minutes here around just ways to think about this, common trouble that people get in?
Yeah, so when I talk about treating this, like I'm doing a webinar series on an ongoing basis. I'm in my 6th season for what's called ADHD Town Hall. I'm also doing an all-day training in October here in Austin on the 19th. And in those trainings, in those setups, I bring in people diagnosed, people who treat it, and people who live around it. And what you're talking about here is the people who live around it. And in living around it, you feel the reverberations of it. And when this is a genetic issue that can be passed on at hair color, height, and weight, it's very inheritable. Now, everyone who has the condition or has the diagnosis or has characteristics, because if you look at the characteristics just on the DSM-5 characteristics, which is our diagnostic manual, right? For ADHD, there's 18 characteristics. Well, you need 6 out of 9 in either area. There's hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive, and focus concentration issues. You need 6 out of 9 to be often or very often in your life. So they have to be in disrupting major life areas. Well, if this is a genetic space, someone may have only 2 or 3 characteristics or 2 or 3 symptoms, but there's not enough to diagnose, but it can still interrupt their life. So I bring that up because in family members and in families, it can be passed on, and everyone's going to have a little different version of how they have to manage it. But if you're someone who does not have the diagnosis of ADHD and you're living with those who do, or you're working with those, or you're overseeing those from a boss or a colleague point of view, you really want to think about, okay, things may not make sense to you immediately. They may look irrational, that someone's behavior doesn't match their intention. And when those things happen, I always encourage family members, bosses, anyone, you've got to increase communication in short-term levels. So these little bitty short check-ins of like, okay, where are we now? What's your focus points here? So someone providing that from the outside can be very helpful. And I also tell the person diagnosed with it, check in with your boss 2 or 3 times a week for 5 minutes. Just make sure your touch points, because what that does is it's a grounding stone for the attentional part of the mind to kind of know where I'm going. So that higher communication level and staying connected is a key piece.
Can I say one thing about that I love? It also then helps the person that has it, let's say we get behind or something, then we feel ashamed and then we're covering it up and then we're ducking the boss and then we bring in attachment and then we're bringing our internal working model and then we create a story about ourselves that can then again snowball. So I love your suggestion because these little huddles, now you're dealing in reality versus your gremlins in your mind.
Very much so, because those gremlins in the mind happened on assumptions and belief systems and all these patterns around attachment and things that just start to morph themselves. And like with couples, I will tell them create a couples business meeting to where once a week you're sitting down to go through organizationally who's buying food, what projects are coming up, what vacation. It's these things you customize because it's a weighing station.
Okay, but I told him to get the milk. And I tell him all the time that I want, 1% not fat free. I tell him all the time and he just doesn't do it. He just doesn't listen. So what
Yes,
about that?
yes. And so the reality is, in that moment, probably he was not listening and he missed the chemistry of that connection. So, how does he strengthen the memory of that connection? How does that person text themselves the information? How do they make it a shiny, interesting kind of piece about the milk that they put a song to, that they put a little name to that helps them to remember it? There's little memory tricks. It's not going to take away the frustration in the moment that it's been forgotten again. My wife and I play this in our 35-year marriage, and she's much better at calmly reminding me. And she will typically remind me about things that are going to affect her or our relationship together. If they're my issues, she might remind me if she remembers or whatever, but she doesn't put that on her plate. And that's important for me to strategize.
Well, and
Okay.
it's also really important for the marriage so that it doesn't turn
Oh,
into
yeah.
kind of a mothering thing.
Exactly, because when you get into that adult parenting child kind of models, right? It
Not
just
sexy. Not sexy.
not at all, not at all. In fact, it's very demeaning, and it can really, but it's easy to drop into feeling like if you're the parent, if you're the family member, because you're having to. Well, okay, so what do you do in that situation? It's like, yes, they may not have been listening. Asking them, okay, what strategy could you use next time to clarify that? Stop and think about it, because they're responsible for that. I still think 95% of the time, if someone else gives you the idea, you're going to resist it, or you're going to think, wait a minute, that doesn't fit for me, versus saying, okay, here's an idea, just try it. At least be curious about it. That could be helpful. But the reality is the person diagnosed with ADHD is responsible for beginning to strategize in their life, kind of how they manage it. So, what do you do with the frustration if you're a family member? This is the key component if you're living around it. And to me, one of the things you do is you have to take care of yourself. I'm asking those with the diagnosis to resource themselves. Family members have to resource themselves also. So are they getting away? Are they taking time to themselves? Are they not picking things up, that they're not responsible for because they're worried they're not going to happen? All these things are components of it, but if you don't take care of yourself, then suddenly what starts to happen is the distress of the condition starts to affect you, and you're having these secondary effects from the ADHD diagnosis rolling over. Now, the reality is these The vast majority of people, okay, everyone with ADHD, they have good hearts. Okay, unless there's character issues going on, there's been severe trauma, or someone's got other issues happening. This is not a meanfully, willfully, I'm just trying to piss you off, so I'm going to forget it again. And that's hard because it doesn't look that way when it's happening. And so having some compassion and frustration tolerance around those interruptive spaces can be helpful for family members. It does not take away the responsibility of the individual to take care of whatever the issue is. I want to be clear about that.
Well, and I like you highlighting the frustration. Like if we're gonna talk to family members, we're gonna talk about frustration because it is frustrating, and you get to be frustrated, and it is frustrating, and I mean, the person who has it is frustrated with themselves
Very much
too.
so.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And so this is where we can move toward the compassion, the empathy spectrum. People with attention issues many times are working very hard internally to manage things. Nobody wants to forget things. Nobody wants to stay disorganized. And so everyone having compassion and empathy and taking care of themselves and doing things that are fun and kind of releasing and relaxing are critically important. Because when I'm on a very hyperactive, impulsive spectrum still. And man, my hyperactivity, I can get things done around here in a lightning speed. And my wife's just like, give him the list and get out of the way. And it's great because, I'll be washing the back of the house this weekend. I washed the front of the house 2 weekends ago. I'm 62 years old. I'm in good shape. I can do those things. But she knows I love doing those kind of things. And so, what is she good at? What am I good at? How do we make a team by having a meeting together to kind of rally the horses and kind of where we are going? It's so critically important. My wife and I have been doing that kind of couples business meeting probably for about 12 or 14 years on her suggestions of we've got to do something, we've got to get around this. It's done wonders for us. One time we went 3 weeks recently without one, and boy, could we feel it. So I suggest them about once a week. These are not emotional tirades to scream about everything. This is where are we? Where are we now, and where do we want to head, and who's responsible for what? That's what we're after.
I love it. I love it. And then you don't have to pay for a couples therapist.
Well, you certainly couples therapies can be supportive, but it's not
Right.
playing that
I'm just
role.
saying it'll save. I'm just motivating folks.
Well,
It'll save you money.
one of the things that brings up that I at least like to address is because I talk about treating professionals as well who treat ADHD, is I tell professionals, look, I really believe you've got to have an educational, action oriented approach when you're working with ADHD. You've got to come in with an agenda mindset. It doesn't mean you have to always be a coach or teaching, but it does mean that it's helpful to help keep your clients on track. I review my notes from the session before with my clients. Here we are on these bullet points. Typically, I see my clients anywhere from like every 2, 3, or 4 weeks because I use this model. And I want to teach them to help themselves. I want them to be a better person by knowing who they are and how they operate. So with therapists, I really want them to engage and not get lost just in the narrative emotional distress of the story. Oh my gosh, it feels good in the moment, but it doesn't take you anywhere long term. And so professionals, it is something I treat as well or teach other professionals how to manage this space of ADHD. And it's critical. It's just really critical.
And speaking of that, we've got a lot of professionals that listen, and they listen from all over the world. And you offer training that is online training, I believe, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that, so that if their interest is piqued, it's not just professionals that you train too. So yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, but say a little more about your offerings.
Yep. So I have something for the adult diagnosed with ADHD called the Storm Team, in which it's a 12 video series in which they can go through to learn about different components of ADHD and kind of how to manage it or what to do with it. With professionals, I have something called ADHD Trailblazing, which is how do you help ADHD clients find their pathways, find the trails in their life that are really going to work for them. And that is a 12-week course for professionals where I'm also asking you to bring in clinical cases that you're working with so that you have examples that you're working with and understanding coexisting conditions, understanding relational aspects, understanding how to personalize strategies. Those things are critical for us. And with family members right now, I'm really directing them to my ADHD town hall, which is again, diagnosed professionals and those who live around it as a webinar series to ask me questions. Come ask me your hardest questions. I do these, like I said, I'm doing season 6 this fall. So that means I've been doing it 3 years. I don't ever plan to stop that as long as I'm professionally in practice, because it's a way station. For those diagnosed long term, they come back in and really touch base using those models to really kind of keep up with what's happening with their ADHD. They're listening to an expert on what are they learning about what's next, where do we go from here, what's the future like. I'm living an incredibly happy, well-resourced life at 62. And it's fascinating to me. I've been treating this so long and I'm still unbelievably passionate about it. It's just, Sue, it warms my heart. Yes, I've known you for 20 plus years as a professional. And I'm so happy what, y'all are doing for this podcast, you and Ann. And it's just like, this is, to me, it's the way to get around this issue, is to really get people good information.
Well, I love it, and I love your enthusiasm. And again, I think that both of us probably are good examples of some of the beauty and creativity and benefit of having a brain that works just a little bit differently. That there's no way having a private practice, a family, pets, writing a book, doing a podcast, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and keeping up with it, even just maintaining just a podcast, that is, it's tough. But it helps to have the fast metronome and the quick mind and multiple open tabs at one time and being chaotic, and so it's a strength.
At the same time, coming back to resource yourself, to keep
Yeah,
yourself in
exactly.
balance. It's so critical. I have really learned, like, sleep. Sleep is so critically important on the spectrum for anyone, but certainly on the ADHD spectrum. I'm up at generally 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning now, meditating or breathing or doing things to really help myself. It's just such a pristine time of the day. I really get it now.
Really wonderful. So, James, you mentioned some of your courses. Can you say how people can find them and find you?
Yeah, so everything is on my website at jamesochoa.com. I have a wealth of resources and information there. And I do, interestingly enough, a year ago, I took back over my interviews of people wanting to work with me. And so I do 20-minute Zoom interviews. I can only do a couple of them a week, but I love still working with people on the front lines, as I call it. And so those can be scheduled on my website as well. But if you look at, kind of that engagement, I also have a podcast I've done 2 seasons of that is it's not an ongoing space, but it's a space of resource, in that it's a radio narrative action theater where I hire 5 voice actors to act out these scenes of an apartment complex where you discover people have a different type of ADHD and what to do about it. And it's called The Complex. And The Complex is on my website. I have 2 seasons of that. Hoping to do a 3rd season next year, along with writing the book. But like you, I've got all these projects going out in front of me. But all that can be accessed through James Ochoa.
Through jamesochoa.com?
Yep.
You are a fountain of resources, a veritable fountain. This has been delightful. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to say, that you want our audience to know about this disease, this neurological condition, this?
I would say a genetic neurological condition is how we think about it. Now, you want to keep moving toward where your life begins to feel normalized. It may be specialized and customized, and you have to do things in a way that really work for you. But you don't think of yourself as something that's weird or strange or wrong or broken. No, this is just the differences I carry. It's my hair color, height, and weight. This is how I work in the world. So you want to feel resourced enough and buoyed up, and you feel, I like who I am. I really care about who I am. And that is not an easy thing to do if you've been pummeled with negative voices and other kind of trajectories coming at you your entire life. So you can get around it, and you can really live a happy life that's meaningful and beneficial and helpful to others. And I feel like I'm living in a dream come true in a lot of ways. I could have never guessed that in 1989, when I was working with this one little 6-year-old and that first insight opened up about this, that I'd be here 35 years later, talking to yourself as a colleague on an incredible podcast and just saying, hey, you can do something about this that's meaningful. So I really want you to hear it.
Yeah, and I really love how accessible all of your material is. So again, this is James Ochoa. His book that is published at this point is Focused Forward: Navigating the Storms of Adult ADHD. It's very easy to read. It's short. If this is on YouTube, I'm going to hold it up so people can see it. Again, it'll be on our show notes. And part of how you access that is you go to therapistsuncensored.com. And if you know the episode number, you can just put the episode number in. But if you don't, just put James Ochoa, just put ADHD in the search field and it will come up. As a matter of fact, while you're there, anything that you're interested in, you can put, our search field is linked to all kinds of things. And when it comes up, each episode will have quite a few resources, as you want to learn more. So we too try to be a fountain of free information and link people to more and more and more so that you can keep learning and growing.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. And I wish you luck on your new book. And yeah, we'll talk again, in a year and a half or so when that emerges. And thank you all listeners for sticking with us. If you're still here, I think that probably means you found some value in this podcast. And if that's the case, something that you could do that would be very helpful, free of charge, is to go to wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to help other people find this treasure trove of all kinds of resources that are in our back catalog. Rating and review is really what we would love the most. That would be a way, if you want to wave at us and give us a thank you back, that would be how to do it. All right. Well, thank you, James.
Thank you, Sue. I sure appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast, as always.
Yeah, me too. All right. We'll see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.